How can I not cancel? When she asked, huh? What? What was that?
This Korean streamer Janity was attacked by a man while she is streaming in France Toulouse, and the man who attacked her called her a Chinese girl and a fucking whore. After that incident, people online were outraged. A lot of French viewers actually flooded Janity's stream and comment sections, saying they were sorry for what happened to her. Even the deputy mayor of Toulouse made an official statement showing full support of Janity. But I'm now here only to talk about the incident itself. What really caught my attention was how people from different parts of the world reacted to it. Just to be clear, most people across all communities were condemning the attacker and sympathizing with the victim. That was the common ground. But at the same time, each community also had its own narratives, focuses, or little nuance that stood out. These don't represent everyone, obviously, but they do reflect some of the deeper social issues or tensions those communities are dealing with. And that's what I found really interesting. Let's start with France, where the incident actually happened. Well, at first, most people condemned the attacker and expressed sympathy for Janity. But pretty quickly, a lot of people concluded, based on the attacker's accent and appearance, that he was a North African Muslim immigrant. That conclusion wasn't exactly random. It tapped into something that's been building for years in France. Frustration with immigration, especially from North Africa and Muslim majority countries. In the eyes of many French citizens, this wasn't just about one guy throwing a punch, it was about a broken system. It felt like proof that multiculturalism in France, as it's currently practiced, is failing. You can see people blaming left-wing governments for being too idealistic, too eager to welcome people from incompatible cultures without demanding integration. Some people believe the attack might have happened because of a clash between Muslim values and Western norms, especially when it comes to a woman in public live streaming. This is where the paradox of tolerance comes in. Should tolerant societies tolerate values that they are themselves intolerant?
Islam is changing Europe's political landscape. Only looking at demographics, several academic studies suggest that multiple European countries could have Muslim majorities by the 22nd century, owing to immigration and high birth rates among Muslim women. However, the shift isn't merely demographic, it's also ideological.
But wait. All of these are still based on speculation, and the identity of the attacker hasn't been officially confirmed. Some even say he might just be a random thug or drug dealer with no religious motivation at all. And even within Islam, there is a huge range of perspectives. Not all Muslims share the same values. And that's why we need to be really careful, because fear can spiral into racism. And in this case, it did, very quickly. So while the surface reaction was outrage, underneath, this incident exposed a deep fracture in French society between the ideals of tolerance and the realities of cultural collision. It also shows just how quickly that fracture and collision can turn into scapegoating. Now, since the attacker called Janity Chinese, that raises the question, how did Chinese netizens react? Even though Janity had visited China before, she still isn't particularly well known in China, and the topic didn't get much coverage in Chinese media, probably due to both her low profile there and China's more closed internet environment. With that being said, I did come across a set of reactions that really stood out. Similar to some racist comments in Europe, some comments blame Muslim immigrants. Some comments directly blame Islamic value. But what's different here is a totally new kind of reaction. The boomerang finally hit back. Got an Asian face but slander China every day? This is karma. In Korea, they are trained to obey US soldiers like dogs. So when a white pig hits them, they just smile through it. They get bullied by white people even in Korea, so what do you expect in another country? In Korea, they got beaten by their American daddies. Outside Korea, they got beaten by white pigs. Doesn't matter where, it's all the same. Yes, they are mocking the victim here. And no, they don't actually know who she is. Janity isn't even well known in China. Most people probably haven't heard of her. But these commenters don't care about her as a person. There was this sort of you asked for it attitude, almost like they were watching enemies fight, like dog eat dog. And you see, that something happens a lot in Chinese nationalist discourse, in which people don't respond to individuals. Instead, they respond to what those individuals are imagined to represent. So in this case, Gennady becomes a stand-in for South Korea, a country that, in their view, aligns with the West, criticizes China, and stays silent when their own citizens was abused by American soldiers. And to many Chinese nationalists, there's no distinction between America and Europe. Both are just the West. So if you are hit by a Frenchman, that's still part of the same system you chose to side with. At this point, this comment wasn't even about her. As a person, it was about the role they think she plays in some larger geopolitical narrative. This is what happens when nationalism turns people into symbols. The person disappears, and all that's left is projection. Well then, what about Taiwan, another Chinese-speaking society with a totally different political identity? Since Taiwan sees itself more like a sovereign democratic country, but China considers it a part of its territory. The tension between the two has been rising for years. China has repeatedly stated that it won't roll out using military force to unify Taiwan. That political pressure has made the issue of identity in Taiwan extremely sensitive, not just internally, but also on the global stage. Well, unlike in China, Gennady is actually quite popular in Taiwan. She's known as Qi Emei, Penguin Sister, and she's even done fan meetups and traveled around the island. So when the attack happened, many Taiwanese netizens responded really quickly. While there were certainly people discussing the attacker and the broader issues with racism or immigration in France, a particularly noticeable trend in Taiwan's discourse focused on one detail, that Gennady was mistaken for Chinese. That just shows how much the world hates China. Next time, make sure it's actually a dirty Chinese woman before you hit. Being discriminated against and beaten for being Chinese is reasonable and normal. No wonder Gennady didn't even care once she heard the reason. Whenever I travel abroad, I always have an "I'm from Taiwan" label on my backpack or clothing. I absolutely hate being mistaken for a chink. Chinese are no better than a dirty slur, and if you dive into the darker corner of the internet, places like Taiwan's infamous toxic forums, you will find even more extreme takes. But here is the thing, this is still racism. It doesn't reject discrimination, it just says discriminate more accurately. Many people believe that China's global image is so bad and it's dragging down all the East Asians, and they would have been no trouble if Gennady just tells the attacker that she is Taiwanese. When a community feels threatened politically, economically, even physically, it will try to draw hard lines around identity. It's a defensive reflex. It doesn't justify all those comments, but it doesn't come from nowhere either. And of course, not everyone in Taiwan thinks this way. Actually, some absolutely reject those kind of mindset, while other people embracing it. Taiwan is an island with deep divides in politics, culture, and generation, but that's another story. Finally, we need to talk about South Korea. It's Gennady's home country. In Korea, the initial reaction was just like everywhere else: shock, outrage, and sympathy for Gennady. And Professor Seok-In-Teo of Sangtin Women University also spoke out, saying that there are some superiority complex problems in Europe towards Asia. While most people reacted with sympathy and outrage, we did see a certain amount of suspicion toward Muslim immigrants and some familiar frustration about China's image affecting how Asians are treated abroad. But none of those angles had the weight, the intensity, or the staying power of what came next. Because in Korea, no matter what the original topic is, the discussion always seemed to lead back to one thing: gender. Yes, political gender gaps exist around the world, but in South Korea, it's on another level.
In a country with the world's lowest birth rate, there is a gender war brewing.
While women are becoming more liberal everywhere, Korean men have taken a sharp turn in the opposite direction. The ideological split between young men and women here isn't just wide. It's the widest among major developed countries. Now that we know the gender gap is extreme, but how did it show up in this very incident?
A growing counter-movement is pushing back.
페미니즘이라는 것이 여성 전체를 대변하는 것이냐, 얘기하신 바와 같이 너희가 반여성이다라고 이런 식으로 결국 낙인을
They were not just mocking her, some of them were actually cheering, as if this attack wasn't something to be condemned, but something they felt justified. This one really shows where that rage is coming from. It's not just about the attacker anymore, it's about Korean women being seen as too close to the West, liking Western culture too much, even liking Western men too much. That betrayal, real or imagined, turns into misogyny. And when Genesis gets hit by a Western man, for some of them, it's not tragedy, it's payback. A moment of dark satisfaction. You always see Western men better because they are more masculine. This is what you wanted. And you were calling a whore? Well, it's a clear understanding of Korean women. This is never about just one moment or one streamer. This is about a society where resentment has no place to go, so it just keeps spilling out into gender, into business, into violence. And nothing about this looks like it will get better anytime soon. So, what are we left with? Across France, China, Taiwan, and South Korea, people all reacted to the same video. But what they saw in it, what they chose to focus on, couldn't have been more different. France talks about racism and immigration, China folded into nationalist outrage, Taiwan turned it into a conversation about identity, and Korea made it a gender war. Each society projected its own fears, frustrations, and fault lines onto this one moment. And that says more about us than about what actually happened. But the more I watched, the more unsettling it became. These weren't just reactions, they were reflections of something much deeper, of who we are and how far we still are from actually seeing each other. They were not just reflections of public opinion, they were mirrors of deeper social fractures.